Okay, so everybody, so to formally welcome everyone to the meeting of the Social Development Committee this morning. First of all, deal with the first item, apologies. I have apologies from Sammy Wilson to record. Any other apologies to record? No other apologies? Okay, thank you. Record. Just to make members aware then, we had an email out yesterday that the Minister would leave the meeting today at 10:30 to attend the meeting of the Executive. This being the case then, I would want to just move on to this particular matter of the planned maintenance settlements and then return to the rest of the agenda immediately after that. But I mean, I've heard this morning that the Executive meeting isn't going ahead today, so does that impact on the Minister's plans or timing? No?
As far as we're concerned.
Well, I may just. I may be just mishearing a rumour mill. It's just it would obviously impact on the time we have available for this particular session this morning. Okay, so I mean, we'll move on the basis that the Minister would want to be leaving at 10:30, and we'll deal with what we can do, and if we need to return to it, then obviously we'll do that as expeditiously as possible. So moving on formally then to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the planned maintenance settlements, and we have a briefing from the Minister and Senior DSD and Housing Executive officials. Have the Minister Nelson McCausland, Will Hare, Permanent Secretary, Andrew Hamilton, Donald Hoolis, Chairperson, Housing Executive, Mike Slade, Chief Executive. Obviously, I don't want to go into any detail of this because people are all aware of the genesis of this particular session this morning. I think for the committee and for yourselves here this morning here to address concerns from the committee, I think the central arguments really are around the fact that we had a very public exposition around problems with planned maintenance contracts, some of which resulted in over £18 million, or a figure of £18 million being announced in the Assembly. And our understanding is that figure then, of course, from the settlement statement has significantly reduced, and in fact, probably fair to say most of the members around the table, although we have no way of validating this, but most members believe that there would be some form of compensation payments due at least to some of the contractors, so we're not fully aware of that, but that has been stated around this table on a number of occasions when we discussed this matter. Then obviously there's also the other issue around the procurement of the consultancy firm Campbell Tickhill and the efficacy and the integrity of that particular procurement. So we deal with that, but I think in view of the Minister may have to leave, then if we can deal with the first element of it, which is really around the announcements made by the Minister, and we've already had some explanations around this, but clearly the committee wants to return to that in some detail here today. And I suppose if we could focus our attention on talking to members now, we can focus our energies here this morning in relation to the discourse between the Minister and Donald in the first instance, given your own, Donald, explanation to the committee previously that you'd met the Minister and briefed the Minister, and then over the next number of days you were made aware of the announcement made in the Assembly, and then you felt it appropriate to keep a consultancy in place. But I'll just leave it at that. As I say, people may have slightly different variations of that or even different recall of all of that. But that's in a nub really what we're trying to deal with this morning, and anything else that the members might feel appropriate in relation to that. Okay, so I mean, I suppose, Minister, if you want to, as we do normally in these things, to give yourself the opportunity to make a brief statement on that, and then we'll follow it up from Donald.
Okay, Chairman, thank you indeed for the invitation to address the committee today in relation to the Northern Ireland Housing Executive negotiated settlement with its planned maintenance contractors. I believe it may assist the committee if I perhaps set the scene in terms of some of the key events in relation to this matter. And if I may, I'd like to start with the original announcement of the extent of the overpayments relating to the maintenance contracts that was made last year. You will recall on the 10th of June 2013, I made a statement to the Assembly in which I highlighted my concerns relating to the serious deficiencies in contract management within the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. Those failings had been identified by the work carried out by ASM and by the Northern Ireland Audit Office, and most importantly, by the Housing Executive's own internal assurance teams, and members will be all too familiar with those findings. I also informed the members that the Chair of the Housing Executive had requested a comprehensive investigation into matters relating to planned maintenance contracts, and that following that investigation I had been advised it was estimated that there were overpayments in the region of some £18 million. The £18 million was indeed an estimate, and I would like to remind the committee that I referred to it in that context as an estimate. Unfortunately, in the subsequent reporting in the media, there was probably not the degree of emphasis one might have wished to see placed on my concerns about the contract management failings and their causes, nor that the figure quoted was an estimate. I'm aware that there has been a view expressed that I should not have advised the Assembly of the suspected level of overpayments, that somehow it was an overreaction on my part. But I would ask members, what else could I have done? Once I became aware of the estimated overpayment figure of £18 million, it was of such a significant scale that it demanded being brought to the attention of the members at the earliest opportunity. To do otherwise would indeed have been remiss of me. I'm also aware that my decision to name the contractors involved has been criticised in some quarters. But I would ask you to simply think about that for a moment or two. How could I advise the Assembly that there was an estimated £18 million in overpayments and elect not to mention the contractors involved? It's inconceivable that the members would not have demanded to know which contractors were involved in delivering planned maintenance, given such a high estimate of overpayments. My sole aim in making my statement on the 10th of June was to provide my colleagues with the fullest details of the situation relating to contract management issues within the Executive, as was available to me at the time, and I stand by that decision. I feel it's important at this stage to emphasise that my concerns throughout this period have always been with regard to the causes of the overpayments or failures within contract management, because it is only in the understanding of how things have gone wrong that we can hope to put in place appropriate corrective measures. As I've already referred to, my concerns have been echoed in the various reports which have been produced over the past few years. ASM, the Northern Ireland Audit Office, Campbell Kell have all documented serious and significant failures within the Housing Executive in maintenance contract management, as well as more general governance and cultural issues. I have previously advised of the enhanced accountability arrangements that I have put in place, the increased level of oversight by the Department. In addition to and in conjunction with this, the Housing Executive has undertaken an extensive transformation programme which is aimed at changing the very core and fabric of the organisation. My officials have advised me that there are clear indications of improved performance. And I noticed the words in the report of last week's meeting where the Controller and Auditor General's Office, I think it was, used the phrase sea change. There have been clear indications of improved performance, but we must keep vigilant and ensure that there is a proper environment which will permit these initial signs of improvement and development to grow and to encompass the whole organisation. As you would expect, we're working closely with the Housing Executive in pursuance of this objective. I also made it clear at the time that the resolution of the issue of overpayments had to be taken forward by the Housing Executive and by their contractors. I rightly provided them with the time and the space to do that. I've always been clear that contractual matters are between the Housing Executive and their contractors. If I have concerns, I will of course bring it to the attention of the Housing Executive. But I'm clear it is their responsibility to deal with their contractors. Indeed, the issue of housing executive operational responsibilities is one we've discussed in the past. I think you'll recall that we had an exchange of correspondence last year when, on the 25th of January 2013, you, as members of the committee, had expressed concerns regarding the specification of hinges for windows and had asked for the procurement of the new double glazing contracts to be delayed. I advised you at the time that this is entirely an operational matter for the housing executive. I would like to move on to the outturn of the negotiations with the contractors and the estimates of the amount to be written off. I only want to make a few observations here because this is essentially an operational matter and was quite rightly handed by the housing executive as the governing authority with the responsibility for such matters. And the chair and chief executive will be able to deal with the detail of anything you might want to discuss. My first point would be to clarify that the original estimate I provided on the 10th of June 2013 was an estimate of overpayments. That work did not estimate the level of possible underpayments which would be due to the contractors as part of the now identified swings and roundabouts operation of the contracts. The housing executive engaged consultants to assist with the identification of the level of over and underpayments and to take the lead in the negotiations with the contractors. Details of the settlement have already been widely published, but the end result was that 3 contractors had to repay some £670,000, with the 4th contractor actually receiving £470,000 as a result of work done which was not claimed for at the time. In addition to and separate from the settlement of the contractors, the housing executive also had to reflect in their accounts an estimate of the payments which they could not substantiate. This work provides estimates of £12.5 million of overpayments and £10.3 million, giving a final write-off figure allowing for adjustments of £2.076 million. That was the final write-off. It may be worth considering for a moment that although the final agreed write-off is just over £2 million, and this is the core point for me of this, the actual level of control failure is better reflected in what was not managed properly. In effect, both the overpayments and the underpayments. It's not a case of setting off swings against roundabouts, it's looking at swings and roundabouts. And that gives us a figure of just under £23 million worth of work, which was not managed in accordance with the contract. And I'm sure as responsible members of this committee, people will be alarmed as they think of the scale of the lack of management control. If I may, think it important that I state clearly that I don't believe that this was the responsibility of the contractors. Responsibility for the effective management of the contracts rested, and indeed continues to rest, solely with the housing executive. It is therefore this level of control failure which, in my view, makes it absolutely essential that we fully understand all the associated causes. At the risk of repeating myself, it is only in the understanding of how things have gone wrong, and I'm sure members will want to understand fully how things went wrong over a long period of years, that we can hope to put in place appropriate corrective measures. On a broader perspective, regarding the approvals of the settlement and write-off, it has been recognised by all parties, the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, my department and DFP, that this has not been the ideal process for the estimation of the financial implications. However, it is the best any of us could hope to achieve given the assurances, and given the circumstances. To attempt anything else would have the potential for incurring costs running into many thousands of pounds, indeed millions of pounds, involved lengthy litigation, and it would still not produce a figure that would be any more reliable. On a final note, I would wish to make a brief reference to some of the actions which the Housing Executive and the Department have taken to address the issues identified and to ensure these circumstances will not arise in the future. The Housing Executive has established, first of all, a contract management improvement plan for planned maintenance schemes brought to the board. Secondly, an action plan on the implementation of Campbell to Kell recommendations, together with target dates, individuals responsible and regular updates provided to the December 2013 board meeting. These continue to be addressed on a monthly basis through Monthly Matters Brought Forward report. And then 30 additional professional staff have been put in place. The Department has already established greatly enhanced accountability arrangements, with regular monitoring and review arrangements in place. In addition, the Departmental Accounting Officer has established a Northern Ireland Housing Executive inspection function, which will subject the NIHE landlord function to a similar level of scrutiny as has successfully been applied to the inspection of registered housing associations. The team has been established and is in the process of developing a terms of engagement, scope and objectives of the inspection programme. The establishment of the inspection team will provide the accounting officer with direct independent assurance on the activities within the Northern Ireland Housing Executive landlord function, and it is hoped that the first inspection report will be available in December of this year. I know the committee has already expressed an interest in this important work. So this is an issue that goes back quite a number of years. The issue of management of contracts is something that goes back a decade, back to the days of direct rule, through the years of devolution when earlier ministers were in the department. And it's important that we get a good understanding of, as I said earlier, what went wrong so that we can ensure that it doesn't happen again. And I believe that we're now in a position where, having identified the issues and addressed the legacies of the past, we're now able to move forward in a good way.
Okay, thank you. I'm just very conscious now that we've only 10 minutes to go, so we're not going to have much opportunity for members to address specifically questions to the Minister. So what I would intend to do, I just want to ask the question myself, the Minister, and then I wanted to ask each of the members if they wanted to ask a question, which obviously is not in any way satisfactory, but I want to try and enable as many members to get a say on before the Minister has to leave.
Okay, just to confirm, we've just checked the Executive is on this morning.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I just asked two questions first of all, Minister, and that is that at any time when you had the briefing from the Housing Executive, in the first instance, were you given to understand that there were caveats, if we could put it that way, in and around the figure of 18 million, because that wasn't reflected in your public announcement in the Assembly. And you did say in your comments to the Assembly that the scale of the problem identified has been a scandal. I think that's what you referred to among the words. So could you just respond to that, the 2 points, the issue around the caveats, with documentation to the Housing Executive Board, which will have as there were very clear caveats put in around that figure, but that wasn't reflected in your comments.
Well, I think the word caveat is covered insofar as you use the word estimate, because that's what an estimate is. It is an estimate. It therefore carries the caveat that there is more work to be done to get to a final figure. The word estimate was the word, therefore, that was properly and rightly used. Others may have tried to, some media people, I think, maybe extrapolated from that, read more into it. But the word was very clearly used and repeated again and again. This is an estimate.
But will you advise that, that the figure of £18 million, the Housing Executive Board have been advised that figure was likely to go down once the contractors were engaged?
Everything at that stage was estimates, guesses, assumptions. I have no recollection. I could not actually recall, have to be honest, exactly what was said at some meetings. We're going back there a period of time. I would not remember the details of that, but I was very clear. The important things I emphasised here, it was stated very clearly that it was an estimate.
Okay. Jim Monitor, Mickey Gregory,
Minister, Dixon contractors are constituents of mine. You chose in the Assembly to name them as participants in an £18 million overcharging in respect of public money. It in fact turns out that far from being overchargers, they were owed almost £500,000 and that they'd been underpaid. I know that recently you telephoned Dixon contractors and issued them with a private apology. What were you apologising for?
The member's obviously been speaking to Danny Dixon because he was the person that I spoke to as the man who runs the company. And we had a good conversation, which I'll return to in a moment. The first point, just to clarify it, is as regards naming companies. As I said earlier in my initial statement, I would have been asked, and it was known already who the companies were that would provide a planned maintenance. People all over the countryside see the vans driving up with the name on the side of them. MLAs know who contractors are. There were only 4 across the province. They provided the service that everyone knew about. Constituents would have seen the vans arriving with the names of the door. Everyone knew. It was not some secret thing. It was well known who the 4 companies were. The issue, in fact, so naming them, I think, was largely irrelevant at that point because it was known already who the 4 companies were that delivered planned maintenance. As regards to the conversation, I made it clear to Mr Dixon, and the conversation ranged over a number of things. I have to say it was very amicable and I think productive conversation, a good one, and we talked not only about the past but also about the future. But it was in regard to the fact that I acknowledged that there had not been an overpayment in their case, and expressed my regret that there had been some intimation that they might have been involved because they hadn't been.
Okay, Jim, I'm going to move on to other members because, as I said, look, we're going to try and...
This is most unsatisfactory.
I appreciate that.
We've had a filibuster for 20 minutes and now we're not getting an opportunity to ask
I accept
questions.
entirely.
Along with most ministers speak for when they come to committee, Chairman.
Sorry, let me just deal with this, Gregory. I mean, it is very unsatisfactory, but in this instance, the Minister has no alternative other than to go to an executive. And I had considered asking the members to reschedule this particular section, but as I said at the outset, we will return to it. I just want to give members an opportunity for the next few minutes to ask a question. As I say, it is wholly unsatisfactory, but it's not the end of it. We will be returning to it with the Minister as we can quickly reschedule that. So, I mean, I do apologise, but it's outside our gift to resolve it in any other way. So, Mickey and then Gregory and then...
Yeah, just a quick question, Minister. Before you made your statement to the Assembly in June, did you discuss with the Permanent Secretary of the Chair of the Executive that you wanted consultants to be appointed?
So it was brought to my attention that the Housing Executive Board wanted consultants to be appointed, that they recognised that here was an issue about how contracts were managed, and that's the core issue in all of this. The core issue is the quality, the nature, the effectiveness of management of contracts. Should it be a sort of very light touch, or with the type of contract that was in place, should it be a more hands-on form, a closer partnership in terms of the management and monitoring of contracts? They wanted some work done in that regard, and it was brought to my attention that they wanted to bring someone in to do that.
So there's no discussion by yourself
It's not something that I initiated.
before the...
It's not something that I initiated. I'm sure the chairman will be able to fill, and others here will be able to fill you in more detail about the timeline for that. But it was something that, when it came to the attention of the board of the Housing Executive, they said we need this.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gregory.
just, Minister, this issue, both at the time of the Assembly and since, has received a very considerable degree of publicity and comment in the media, in the Assembly. Both the amount, how you got it, and what you did with the information when you got it. What I want to ask you is, since the initial period, through the period of months that has elapsed from then until now, have you had any either private or public comment, submissions, suggestions, proposals from anyone in public, like the MLA or otherwise, as to what you could or should have done when you received the information, differently to what you did?
Well, the implication of what some MLAs are saying is that you should really say nothing that's the implication of it, because they're saying that if you mention something public, that's a wrong. And it struck me as it's strange, because I can remember my colleague, Mr. Poots, being severely criticised at one point by, I think it was John Dallett, for not bringing some information similar to this situation to the Assembly. It's one of those things where, if there is a serious problem, this was a problem that had been around for quite some time.
We need to try to keep the answers as well as the questions brief, because, as I say, we're trying to be fair to members here. It is a wholly unsatisfactory situation.
But I just, the one sentence I want to put forward is that simply this, that the issue was one of contract management which goes back to 2004.
Minister, sorry, we're dealing with the specific issue around the current planned maintenance settlement.
Of course.
And your public announcements, which identified 4 contractors, which identified a figure of 18
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important.
All I'm trying to
Sorry,
do,
I
Chairman,
understand that.
all I'm trying to do is to see if the Minister has received any submissions.
I haven't received any
by
submissions.
MLAs
That's the
about what you should have done
No,
differently.
there's been no submission, not a single one.
Well, that's the
That's okay.
question, then you've
Fair enough.
and you've answered that question, because I said earlier on, we're in a very bad situation this morning to deal with this. Fran McCann, Dolores and Megan.
Thank you. And again, about what you said, I think it's totally unsatisfactory that we're not getting the questions that we need. But
Fran, just to make a point, just for everybody else, other officials will remain in the room to
Yeah.
finish this.
well, see, in June 2013, you informed the Assembly of an overpayment of £18 million, and you added that this was either incredible incompetence or willful corruption. Do you still stand by that in terms of contractors?
I think that one of the difficulties with this is that there's a narrative that some members have developed in their minds, which is not the narrative that was delivered that day. Which is not the narrative that was delivered that day. And maybe the member has gone back and read Hansard in the last 24 hours, but I did go back and read it. And it was very clear.
Did you blush?
It was very clear.
Well, we should now, though.
All right, folks, sorry.
Blush, Minister, when you read it?
Okay.
No, Chairman, actually, I didn't.
You're asked a specific question, Minister, by the last member about the remark that you
Yes,
made. which
but
are-
Chairman, it is difficult to answer questions when you have a member who
But you
seems
were
to
asked a
persist in
question, but
interrupting.
you answer the question.
The question that the member asked there was in relation to what was originally said. I relayed information which had been given to me by the Housing Executive. I was quite clear, again and again the point was made, that this was not about anything really other than failures in contract management. Now, it's easy for some people
Prime
to
Minister,
put... Sorry.
No, I have to stop you.
I'm done.
Sorry, no, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. You were asked a specific question. We will have time to elaborate further when you return to the committee, but everybody's agreed you're going to ask one question, so they're asking one question, but they want an answer. Do you stand by the remarks that the £18 million that you referred to in your statement to the House was either a result of incompetence or willful corruption? That's the
It's
question.
not
we're
an
asked, so-
accurate summary, though, Chairman, because he said an estimate, which you didn't say.
He said it could be more than 18 million.
Sorry, just...
All right,
Yes, or less.
hold on a second. Hold on a second. We'll get no further on here if we continue in this way. So I'm just simply saying to you, Minister, you were asked that one question. Do you stand over those remarks that you made?
It was
in
clearly
that-
incompetence.
Or willful corruption?
It was clearly incompetence.
Okay, that's your answer. Fair enough. So
Clearly incompetence. Couldn't be anything else. Now we've had a thorough investigation.
that's your.
And therefore I was right in what I said.
Okay, well, we will return that because in the statement around the settlement, it actually says that all parties acted in good faith. But anyway, we'll return to that.
No,
So-
just the add-on that there, that given the information you have now, do you not think the incompetence rested with the chair of the Housing Executive who provided, which is obviously now wrong information, do you not think he should have resigned at that?
No.
Okay. That's
How do overpayments arise? They arise because there was incompetence at a particular time in the past in the Housing Executive under a previous regime. And if certain members aren't prepared to face up to the flaws and failings of the Housing Executive at that time, then it's the sad reflection on them, not on anyone else.
okay. Dolores.
Seems to me, Chair, that there's more gross guesstimates than any actual fairly accurate estimates. But, Minister, will you now apologise to those contractors whose businesses you and your statement in the House have done harm to? And perhaps you could outline to the committee which officials you now hold accountable for this now erroneous information that was provided to you?
The information that was provided to me was an estimate of overpayments. The other side of the picture that was not dealt with that day was the issue of compensation payments. But I would suggest that if the member wants to question people about this, maybe it's time that she went back and questioned the predecessors in my department from her own party who presided over the housing executive at the time and throughout the period when this was happening, when there was a total mismanagement by the housing executive in regard to these contracts. Maybe she would like to go back and question them before she starts asking anybody else about anything.
Chair, maybe the Minister would address the actual question.
Yeah, you're asked the question.
Oh,
And as the Minister well knows, it was his predecessors who instigated the investigation into the Housing Executive, and perhaps he should be a wee bit more self-aware of his feelings.
Okay, so
Sorry,
the question, sorry, hold on a second. Hold on a
Well, I
second.
want to answer what the members just said.
Well, the question
Answer
was,
the question would be a useful start.
the question was there an apology due to the companies that were named in the statement to the House? That's the question.
I think it's important to remember that in fact, all the contractors acknowledged, although 3 of them were those who were involved, they all acknowledged in their agreed position, and I checked that the words are right, there were significant overpayments. They acknowledged that as contractors. Now, Mrs. Kelly may not want to acknowledge that herself. She may not like it. It may not suit her narrative, but those are the facts, as is the fact that all of these things are a legacy of a regime that was under the control of the SDLP.
Chair, the question was, is there an apology now due to those contractors whose businesses were harmed by the erroneous allegations put into public
there
domain
was no-
by the
no
Minister
erroneous-
and
no.
his officials?
No, there was no-
his
Okay,
officials.
there was no
Who
erroneous
is
allegation.
accountable?
No,
Who
no, the
is
member
accountable,
doesn't-
Minister?
Okay, that's
The member doesn't like
drawn a line onto that.
The member doesn't like the
Drawn a
truth,
line.
the facts,
Minister,
because it
Minister,
exposes the failure of the SDLP.
Minister
Accountability.
McCausland, excuse me, I'm chairing the meeting and I'm asking you to be quiet, please. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing a line on that particular discourse.
Absolutely.
There was a question asked that hasn't been answered, but we will
has
return
been
to it.
answered. Oh, it has
And
been
what we need to
answered.
deal with.
Chairman, you can't
One
say
item.
the question wasn't answered when it
The
was.
question has been answered more than fully.
The
They
question-
don't like the answer, but there is
Sorry,
the answer.
excuse me, the question had been,
It has
was
been
there an
answered.
apology been afforded? So there hasn't been an apology afforded. Have I misheard the last
No,
question?
no, the contractors accepted there were significant overpayments.
And as I said, I would ask people when we return to this evidence session, they need to reflect on the statement announcing the settlement, because there's a narrative in that which actually counters some of what has been said in the last few minutes. So anyway, we will return to this because, as I said, I'm going to try and refer to everybody to ask one question, and we will return to all these matters in detail. So Michael Copeland, and then finish off with your text.
Thank you, Minister. The speech you delivered in the Assembly that we're referring to was based on information received in a report to the Housing Executive. Can I ask you how and when and by what method you were made aware of the contents of the report? Because, as I understand it, there were quite narrow time frames. So when did you become aware of what the report said? In other words, the information that the £18 million was based on, and how was it communicated to you?
That was communicated to me at a meeting on 29th of May.
And by what, by face-to-face meeting or by email or
It was a
letter?
face-to-face meeting, and the chair will be able to disclose exactly the details of what he said.
And it was just yourself and the chairman or other representatives?
Oh no, there would always be officials there.
Okay, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Just, Minister, given the nature of the issue at hand and the advice from the Housing Executive that Campbell Kell should be appointed through a very short process in order to investigate these matters, how on earth did you manage to believe that they would give you the information that you needed, given the nature of the problem? Why did you not independently wish to appoint someone to assess the situation for yourself, and why did you rely on the Housing Executive to make the recommendation with regards to an investigation?
Well, if the Housing Executive Board and the Housing Executive have the responsibility for managing contracts,
Which they weren't doing.
we're doing well, certainly. That's a point that I made there, and one that we're agreed on. It was important then to get a quick turnaround, to get some sort of report, and I was pleased that the board of the Housing Executive had faced up to the issue, had acknowledged it, and was about to procure someone to investigate this. And it's pointless having two people trawling over the one thing at the one time, because a lot of information will be gone into. A lot of officials within the Housing Executive will be providing information, answering questions. There'll be a lot of work done. There's no point in duplication. If there was duplication, somebody would criticise that, I'm sure, as well. And therefore, if someone was being brought in to do that work, the key thing there for me was that it would be a good piece of work. And I think, in my view, when you look at the Campbell to Kill report, it identifies very clearly what the issues were and confirms what had already been said by the internal audit in the Housing Executive and by the audit office. All of these people were all saying the same thing.
But can you understand the scepticism of those who might consider that you taking the advice of the Housing Executive would have this major problem?
Didn't take the advice of the Housing Executive, I took the advice of the Accounting Officer, Permanent Secretary.
Okay. So, I mean, people who have indicated they want to ask...
I went against what the Permanent Secretary said. There's probably a question about that as well.
Okay, so those who indicated they wanted to ask the questions have asked their questions, and again, it's unsatisfactory, the position that we're in, but that's not the Minister's own fault.
Thank you.
I would suggest then the Minister will then retire to go to the Executive meeting, but we will be inviting you back again, and our officials will arrange with your own office so that will be done quickly. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Minister, thank you. And obviously, we're still on the same subject, so we're not constrained to the same time limit, but I would ask members to try and stick to maybe 2 questions at a time to allow us to go around the table and flow amongst all the members. Okay. So, Jim Allister.
The Campbell to Kell report, which you sanctioned, spent a lot of money over budget and produced an analysis itself saying that the debt may not be 18 million but likely between 9.5 and 13 million. For all their alleged expertise, though we know they are not forensic accountants, they got it badly wrong. It wasn't anywhere close to 9 or 13 million.
It was 12.
No, sorry.
I'm sorry. Let's have the questions put, and then
The
we'll
net figure is £200,000. Not 18 million, not 13 million, not 9.5 million. So what value was there in the Campbell to Kell report, which patently got it so wrong, and which was always going to get it wrong, because it wasn't even talking to the contractors?
Let me just go back to the beginning. The board, if I may answer at some length at the moment with this, because I think it's important for me to say that we are pleased at the Housing Executive that this issue has been resolved. It's been a running, festering sore since October 2010, where it first came to light. That was 2 years before I was appointed. And I have sought to get it resolved and finalised. And that is the action I have taken. The board knew about it in 2011, I think it was October 2011, and the can had been completely kicked down the road time and time again. And I sought to ensure that the issue and the size of the problem that we were being told about bit by bit was crystallised, which is where the 18 million came from. But because we'd had a long, long history of not getting to the bottom of the problem, we as a board decided to have an independent review to go along to check what we had been told about the management of the contract was correct, and indeed whether the issue about the overpayments were right. Now, Mr. Allister is comparing apples and pears, if I may say so. The 18 million was an overestimate. We now know that. The estimate was nearer 12 million. What we did was we entered into a negotiation where we stated quite clearly that compensation events were part of the negotiation, which is where we reached the settlement. Now, I have been quite clear that this has been a poorly managed contract, which we needed to resolve in order to move on to actually improve things for the future. You've heard some of it. I will talk a little bit more later, if you wish to hear, about the issues that we want to tackle in the light of our issues around procurement. And we've already heard from Mags Lightbody about some of the work on the journey to excellence. But the simple truth is that the original estimate for the that was given was wrong. It was too high. The Campbell to Kell report actually, I thought, got the figure reasonably right in terms of the overpayment figure. But what it didn't discuss, and wasn't asked to discuss, was the question of compensation events.
Mr. Hoodis, the purpose, according to the Permanent Secretary's brief, of the Campbell-Cotell report was to ensure that the information that had been given to the board, the 18 million information, was accurate and complete. Those were the words, accurate and complete. Now, the outturn showed that 18 million was far from accurate and far from complete. And by the same token, the outcome of Campbell-Cotell was far from accurate and far from complete, because it left the belief that there could have been overcharging to the tune of £13 million, when there patently was not. Now, how can you possibly say that it gave an accurate and complete picture when it arrived at figures like that, and when it was never going to get the full picture because it declined? And strangely, the terms of reference didn't require it to. It declined to even talk to the contractors to find their side of the story. So it was always going to be a one-sided presentation.
The work that was asked of Campbell-Cotell was to review what the board had been told by its officials over years, to see whether they'd been told the full story. A part of that was the issue about whether the 18 million was right. What we had from Campbell-Cotell was checking whether we'd actually got the full story of the management of this contract, and to look at what we needed to make certain it didn't happen again.
But the full story included the fact that the contractors were being underpaid in respect of some work.
That emerges from the negotiations that took
But these
place later.
marvellous people, Campbell and Cotell, they didn't unearth that. They weren't even allowed to look at that. So where was this pursuit of a complete and accurate picture?
Well, it was a complete and accurate picture of what had happened at the housing executive.
But it wasn't a
at the time.
complete and accurate picture if what was happening at the housing executive was that there was an arrangement whereby there was a swings and roundabouts and contractors were being underpaid to the tune of several £1 million. How could you say it was complete and accurate if it obliterated that from the formula?
Well, where did the swings and roundabouts come from?
From the contracts that you operated within the housing executive.
Now, let's be clear. This is a very important issue. What we are saying is, in the management of public money and the management of contracts, what happened was the housing executive abrogated its responsibilities. It allowed the contractors, in a sense, not to claim compensation events when they were due, but to overcharge on the main kitchens, for example.
Well, what I would suggest at this point...
And now, let's be clear, that's how it's worked out.
Well,
There were
sorry.
overpayments
Well, what I'm going to do here...
and underpayments.
Donald, I'm going to suggest that people reflect for a minute. I'm going to move on to another member now because I need to switch around. But people need to, sorry, but I want you to reflect on the statement on the settlement, which talked about, and I really am advising people not to rehearse the failures of the past in terms of public commentary, because I don't want this committee here to be a platform for misinformation. or misunderstandings of what's going on.
Does that apply to members as well, Chairman?
There was a settlement statement which refers to all of the parties acting in good faith. That contradicts an assertion that people were overcharged and all the rest of that. Now, I'm just asking people to reflect on that. I'm going to move on to the next members because I'm going to try and give all the members at least a chance to ask a couple of questions for it. And then we will continue for as long as we need to this morning. Mickey, Brady, and then Meggle, and then Gregor.
Yeah, just on the appointment of Campbell Tickell, you give Mr. Hoodless a reason for the appointment in such a short period because it was done on Friday, 7th of June. The Minister was making his statement on the 10th of June. And it was simply because the Minister was due to speak in the Assembly on the following Monday. So it appears that the reason for the appointment of Campbell Tickell was to facilitate the Minister in a statement to the Assembly. Do you still stand by that reason?
That was correct. That I thought it was important to get it in place before the Minister spoke, because if he were asked who's doing it, that it would be put in place. But if it hadn't been, the Minister hadn't made a statement on the 7th of June, we would have done it on the 10th or 11th, because it was important that, having been told as a board, and that we were told as a board that 18 million had been overpaid, that we needed to investigate that independently. And therefore, to do that needed to be done quickly and effectively, which is what happened. It was done within 3 months. So, actually, although the 7th of June was the date I said last time, if the Minister hadn't made a statement, it would only have been done 2 or 3 days later.
Well,
Right, just on that, because the Minister talked about caveats and equated that to estimate, as if it were the same thing, which I find that difficult to understand how that could be brought in. But when presented with the 18 million figure in May 2013, the Executive Board was advised that the 18 million is expected to reduce as more evidence is generated and contractors are directly engaged in providing their own evidence. So obviously there were caveats put to the board. Why were those caveats not, because it went on to say the estimates summarised in the table above need to be refined and strengthened through more sampling. So why were those caveats not given to the Minister, who got up, and I was in the Assembly when he made the statement, talked about the 18 million, as if that was almost a definitive figure. It was an estimate. The word estimate is mentioned, but there were quite a number of caveats put in place that the board, the Housing Executive Board, knew about. And it seems to me peculiar that the Minister didn't know about that, you know, because ultimately he's responsible for the department and therefore responsible for the Executive.
My only discussion with the Minister about the 18 million was on the 29th of May. I think what I would say to you, that the board were driving the executive team to settle this matter, crystallise it, settle it, which is what has now happened. And we therefore, as a board, were clear that we wanted to enter into negotiation with the contractors to settle it, rather than get to a point where, because this was public money, we would be forced to litigate, which would have been expensive to everyone involved and not helpful. I have always made it clear to this committee that we need good working relationships with contractors because they deliver services to our tenants. They are our, in a sense, presence for many tenants. And therefore, this running saw, which was an inheritance going back to 2010, was something that had to be got rid of, settled. So that is what we've done. And the issue to me, very strongly, is we have settled something that has been festering and was actually undermining our relationship with contractors. I want to ensure that we build good relationships with contractors.
No, that's fine, but the Minister's statement referred specifically to 18 million and referred specifically to 4 contracts. As it turns out, and Mr Allister has pointed out, Dixon's have been totally absolved and yet they were mentioned. So all these caveats were already known to the Housing Executive Board. My really question, to go back to it, I don't want to labour the point, is that the Minister wasn't aware of that. And it seems to me if you're getting up to make such a definitive statement and such a wide-ranging statement in terms of the contractors, that at least he should have been aware, or would at least have said, well, there's a figure of 18 million has been given, but it is subject to refinement or is subject to change or whatever. That simply wasn't the case. And, you know, what came out of that statement was that you had 4 contractors who were guilty of quite serious offences, you know, and that's the public perception. And whether that's right or wrong, perception can sometimes be everything. Not sometimes, you know, and I know there's been a settlement and all the rest of it, but in the public mind there's still that perception.
Yeah. You know, I would be sorry for that. What I would point out to you is that we were advised that, but we had no detail. The board were not the negotiators. They weren't the people dealing with the contractors. They were just being informed of what was happening, and I was driving them to reach a settlement.
I think everybody agrees that the need and the drive, as you put it, was entirely appropriate to fix any problems which have been long-standing and well identified. I don't think anybody here would take any issue with that whatsoever and would give you 100% support on the Minister to root out any problems that there were. Nobody has taken any issue around that, but what we're dealing with here is that we had public statements made naming 4 contractors linked to an estimated £18 million overcharging, and there was some colourful language used in how that might have occurred. So the issue here is, and the Minister was already asked the question to give a very clear answer. You've been asked, was the Minister being advised that the £18 million figure was heavily caveated, as the board had been, and in fact it was made very clear to the board that that £18 million figure will reduce once the contractors were engaged. 2 problems for the committee in that regard is that, first of all, we are not being told. I mean, the Minister is very clear in his response that he was not advised of that caveat. And second of all, how then could Campbell Tickell have got to a proper estimation when they wouldn't even talk to contractors? So we have a difficulty in understanding the process here. We're not at all questioning the need, and as I said earlier on, 100% support from this committee to root out any problems of contract compliance and so on. But it's a process that has led to a very public debacle, which has come really to naught. But those 4 contractors still have their name out there. And we end up spending an awful lot of time trying to work out how these problems actually have evolved. So that's what people here are trying to address.
I think I have to accept that the caveats were not effectively communicated.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Michael.
Thanks, Chair. And I apologise if I get slightly convoluted here. I just want to clarify something. Campbell Tickell were appointed Friday the 7th of June. The £18 million figure was already in existence at that stage. They prepared their report between Friday the 7th of June and Monday the 9th, is that correct? Minister was going to speak on the Friday? On the Monday, sorry?
No.
Which Monday? That's what I don't understand.
We appointed them. They completed their work, I think, at the end of September. It was a 3-month contract that we asked for, and I think it was on time, or just a week late.
The board were advised at some stage, according to this, that, as my colleague has said, the 18 million is expected to reduce as more evidence is generated. So was there something going on in the background in parallel that was indicating that this figure might vary? And if so, what was it?
Well, I tell you, let me explain. You know, this is one of the issues for the board that it needs to address in the future. For example, we were told as a board that compensation events were not allowed after 8 weeks. We then said, because we were, as a board, determined to negotiate a settlement, that we would allow them. Later, we were then advised that actually they'd added some contractual terms to the contract, which effectively invalidated that, and the compensation events were allowable.
They being who?
The people who set up the contract at the Housing Executive.
The Housing Executive?
Yeah, yes, I mean, it's the Housing Executive. I mean, this was never set up properly at all, this contract, which has caused the problems. And as I say, it's been a running sore. And the can was being kicked down the road constantly. And of course, it's very difficult. If you're saying to the contractors, look, we've got, you've been overpaid. Well, they're not going to turn around and say, well, I'll write you a cheque, are they? And we were having difficulty actually crystallising the issue and getting agreement and done it. We have now done that, and I want to ensure that we have good working relationships with contractors in the future, and that we make other changes which make their life simpler and our life simpler, which I can talk about if that's helpful.
Well, I don't want to be leaving that one hanging in mid-air, because that's twice you referred to that, but I just want to make the point, Donald, because in phase 2 of the inquiry, we've been trying to address the fact that there were a whole range of deficiencies, if we can describe it as that, were identified, then a whole series of recommendations put in place to correct those problems. And yourself, of course, and others have given evidence to that phase 2, which the committee then has to satisfy itself, have all of the necessary measures been put in place. So we have actually dealt with that in phase 2 of the inquiry, if you know what I mean. So it's not that we're not listening. This is not specific to the inquiry, of course, this is outside the inquiry, but we have given yourself the opportunity to come to the committee in the inquiry to specifically address the measures that you have taken, and others as well. And you've had,
but we have an agenda for change, which is important
I'm not
to
disputing
understand.
that.
And if I may, delivering the plan maintenance contracts, which we're doing now, but we need to look at our contracts. They're extremely complicated and bureaucratic and inflexible, which the contractors will tell you. We need to simplify those. We have what are called single element programs, kitchens, bathrooms. No sensible landlord manages his property that way. They look at the property holistically and what's the need for the property. We have no capital program. So properties in poor state of repair don't get anything done. And we need to change that. As part of that, we need to ensure operationally that the contracts are managing local offices. We need to support that centrally, and we need to get the balance of skills and staffing right there.
We do, Donald, sorry, but we do appreciate all that, and I might give you actually the opportunity at the end of the session.
Right, okay, but I'm just saying that what there is a totally unsatisfactory method of contracting that we need to address for the future.
We're not going to take any issue with any of that, but we want to try and deal with the specifics for this morning of the agenda, which you're made aware of. And I'm only making a point that we have allowed you and obviously welcomed you here previously during phase 2, and I will give the opportunity at the end of this session just to make any closing remarks, which will obviously no doubt include that, because you didn't have the opportunity to start a meeting. Michael, you were still finishing.
Thank you. Again, I apologise for coming back at you. There's some notes in here that indicate the reason that Campbell Tickell, I presume, were appointed on Friday the 7th of June was simply because the Minister was going to speak in the Assembly the following Monday. What's the really...
Well, let me be clear. The board agreed that it needed an independent report.
We being who?
The board.
Yeah.
The board agreed that it needed an independent report, and Campbell Tickell were the ones chosen by for the single tender action.
Recommended by yourself?
Yes, I recommended it.
Yeah. But it's the relationship between the Minister speaking on a Monday and the driving factors that indicated this had to be done back on the following Friday. What's the...
Well, as I've already explained, I thought that it would be sensible to have the independent review in place before the Minister spoke, in case someone asked, well, who's doing this independent review? Now, as it happened, I don't think the Minister mentioned the independent review in his statement to Stormont, but I'm not party to that, and he may have done. So I thought it was important to take that action then. But it would have happened pretty soon after, if it hadn't been done on June the 7th. It was important that when the board were told that it was 18 million, that it had an independent assessment of whether the story had been told and the information it had been given was correct.
Okay.
Were they told it was 18 million, or were they told that it might be 18 million, it might be more, might be less?
It was told it was estimated at 18 million.
Okay. Gregory?
Yeah, the storm, if I can describe it as that, seems to revolve around the initial figure being estimated at 18 million, and now you're talking about 12.5 million, thereabouts. I suppose my first question is, hypothetical maybe, but if at the time you were appointing Campbell to Kell, informing the Minister, if the figure had been 12.5 million then, would you have done anything differently?
No. The whole management of the contract was wrong. And we needed to be sure that what we've been told about it was now fully out in the open, so we could deal with the problems and make certain it didn't happen again. So
Right.
I don't think, if it had been 2 million, it would have been wrong.
I think, I mean, I'm just cautioning here because we're in the discourse now which is saying it may not have been £18 million, would have been 12, or I can't remember the figure Gregory quoted there, it was 12 or 12 and a half. Now, the settlement doesn't refer to 12 and a half, so I fail to see how we can be referring to a figure of 12 and a half when that is not represented in the settlement. So therefore, people need to be mindful, because what we're actually suggesting here is that, well, maybe a settlement, but there's still £12.5 million going astray. And I think we need to be very careful what we're saying here, because I don't want this committee meeting this morning to be a platform, as I said earlier on, for misinformation being out there. Because this would suggest that the problem wasn't £18 million. In fact, it was 12.5 or 12 million, that figure has been quoted. But that's not reflected in the settlement statement.
No.
So I think we need to be mindful of what we're saying here. So all I'm doing is disassociating the committee formally from what any member might say. I'm just saying that to protect the ball of us around the room.
I'm only making the point that whatever the figure that we were presented with overpayment.
Yeah, but I'm
given
saying the figure needs to relate
the
to
road for so long,
Sorry, Donald,
it was
this-
important that we had an independent review.
The figure needs to relate to the settlement statement, because that is the legal basis upon which we have to deal with this. So I'm just saying that just to exercise whatever circumspection is required. Well, you want to come in on that?
Just, Andrea, I think the audit office, I think, is very valuable. I think it's in the report to the council. Actually gives a good explanation of how this is in public expenditure terms and public. I don't know if you've got the reference there, but it might be useful for the committee because that sets out these flows and issues.
We've heard the full
There
audit.
are, Chair, if I can maybe clarify, there are two sides or two aspects of this. One is the settlement, which is quite right, and that settlement came out to, as we know, the figure of repayment of 670,000 by 3 of the contractors in total.
And you
plus
accepted that settlement, not
470,000,
completed?
and that's a separate issue. But then when it comes, it's not then the issue about then the overpayments and underpayments figure comes through because of the public accountability issues, where under government accounting and management public money, the housing executive is under an obligation to seek approval if it's not pursuing all income it feels that it is due. And that's where the figure comes, and that's why there is an obligation, even where estimates are uncertain, where if claims are not being pursued, they need to get approval not to pursue them. And that's where we come to the issue of overpayments and underpayments. And so the starting point was the 18 million. Then there was an adjustment to that to take account of the fact that that included work that was ongoing. And that work could be, these issues could be resolved under the terms of the contract for that work, so that was taken out. And then there was a refinement of the estimate of overpayments calculated as a result of more detailed sampling, and that brought us to the figure of 12 million. Then to get the full picture, of course, you have to take account of claims, compensation events, monies which were due to the contractors. Now there is an issue here. In terms of the contractors will look quite legitimately at that being an offset issue, and we have accepted the good faith of the contractors in all of this. But in terms of the public accountability, we still have to look at whether, is the estimate correct? Now, we had the contractors saying that themselves acknowledging, and it was agreed by the housing executives, that there was £8 million of compensation events associated with kitchens. There was no agreed figure with the contractors for the other work, the external cyclical maintenance and the local area priorities work. But again, because of the public accountability arrangements, we needed to come to a view about that, and the view was that in total the compensation events best estimate would have accounted for £10 million, which then left the balance between those two figures was the £2 million of write-off. And that's the story. I think we acknowledge that this is all based on estimates. We have clearly said that the figures were not fully endorsed by the contractors. And we have acknowledged that in seeking the approval for the write-off, that the good faith of the contractors is not in any way compromised. And those are all very important qualifications, if you like, to the write-off of the approval by the department and by DFP.
Okay, Andrew, thank you for that. Greg, you were...
I think it's useful. I think it would be fairly obvious that the use of the word settlement would be a word that would be used in conclusive arrangements in terms of after all the discussions have been held, and I understand that. But I think we go back to the point, Donald, that you made. So whatever the figure would have been shown to be in May 2013, are you saying you would have taken the action that you did?
I'm certain the board would, because the nature of the management of the contract was such that it was causing the problems that were unresolved. They continued. There was an issue that we were being told about overpayments. There were no discussions that were brought to our attention as a board of underpayments or compensation events. And what caused me was this contract was set up on the basis of what has been described as swings and roundabouts. That's no way to run a contract and no way to deal with public money. We'd abrogated, the Housing Executive abrogated responsibility to manage the contract properly, and therefore it became a running sore which was difficult to resolve. And as I say, my intention has been to put it behind us, to resolve it, so we could move on from it. But it was a mistake. The whole contract was done on what they call Egan principles, which was partnering. Michael Latham was later the one who did it for housing particularly. I personally have been responsible for running partnering contracts, and I know perfectly well you don't abrogate responsibility. You work closely with the contractor in joint teams in order to get value for money, save money, so you can spend it elsewhere or improve the quality. That's the nature of partnering. This was just saying, well, you get on with it and just charge us. It's just a beggar's belief, honestly, that this sort of contract could be set up. I don't blame the contractors, they were asked to do it. But having got a problem with it, we had to resolve it. And I'm sorry, that we get to 18 million and it wasn't right. But we did have to resolve the issue and account for the public money, settle the issue, move on, change, look at in future contract form to make certain it's simple and flexible, works for contractors and works for us. That's what we've got to do.
Okay.
Just one more question, Chairman. I know time's tight. You talked about moving on. You've said what you've said about how you handled this. You had also said that this went back to 2010. Mm-hmm. So we've had a sort of a 4-year period between then and now. How sure are you now, in the autumn of 2014, if we set aside the storm and the hyperbole that has surrounded this issue, how sure are you now that planned maintenance looking forward is going to be dealt with in a much more efficient manner and cost-effective manner compared to what you've just described as how it was done in prior times?
I think the answer to that is the board have been satisfied that there are greater controls in place and that the contracts will be run more effectively. But I also would say that there is a lot more work to be done on how we procure and how we manage contracts, the contracts we use, the systems we use in future. So it's work in progress. But I think the Chief Executive, Acting Chief Executive, is the one to give you the assurances that operationally are managing the contracts. We've been given that. I think you should hear from her.
Okay.
Chair, shall I come in on that point, or?
Yeah?
Well, again, it is really, but I will take it at the minute because I don't want anybody thinking that we don't want to hear the more rounded picture. But as I said earlier on, what we're dealing with in phase 2, we'll give the opportunity to end the side. But if you want to make a brief comment on that, Mags, then please do. But what?
Chair, as you say, for phase 2, you've heard extensive detail from a host of sources on the controls and the evidence of improvement there. In terms of closing out those live schemes still being dealt with and excluded from the settlement, I've been working personally with the 4 contractors. We have a clear process in how we're going to correctly manage all of those out, and we're engaged in that process right now. The new contracts are up and running and moving at a pace. Again, quite different arrangements. Consultants are a key feature of those. We've been working again to stress test all of that to make sure the controls as set in the contract are there, working and appropriate. We've had some early feedback from contractors and consultants that the checks are onerous, but again, for this committee, I have to be satisfied that we're managing those properly, listening to what they're saying and how we can work better and faster, but I have to be absolutely certain that they're managed effectively. So giving this committee that comfort from me.
Yeah, thank you for that. Fran McCann and Dolores.
Sure, I'll try to be brief on the thing. Did you read the Mayor McDonald report?
No.
Didn't? I actually find that amazing that you didn't read the Mayor McDonald report. As a matter of fact, my understanding is that the Mayor McDonald report had disclaimers, their findings on the basis that they were directed to ignore the rights of claim. And they run up this, but you haven't read it, so I'll take on. See, in terms of the Campbell-Tickell report, you had said that they had the relevant previous experience in dealing with this, but the Campbell-Tickell themselves says that they had neither a legal firm nor forensic accountancy experience. So I take it that when they were brought in, they hadn't got the experience to follow through. And as a matter of fact, I think as committee, I think all members of the committee said that they found the whole report shambolic, didn't answer the questions. The figures they give was, I think, between 9 and 13 million rather than 18 million. And it left people here with a belief that they were poorly picked, and the committee was being ill-advised on how to proceed with them.
There wasn't a requirement for legal or forensic accounting in the type of report that they do and did. And I just have a different opinion about the Campbell-Tickell report. It was very helpful to the Board of Housing Executive in setting out the story of what had gone wrong and what we needed to do to put it right. The 9 to 13 million was a small part of that, but it was a much more accurate measure of the overpayment than the one we've been given.
Are you still saying there was a huge overpayment that the contractors...
there was... I mean, you've heard from...
the Minister...
One at a time. Sorry. One at a time.
The Minister had mentioned 4 contractors' names. There's been a settlement, but are you still saying that there was a huge overpayment of those contractors?
There was the overpayment offset, as Andrew has just outlined to the committee about how the figures were reached. What was not at that time, because the board had been told at that particular time that the compensation events were time barred. So that was an issue we, as a board, reintroduced, and actually, in terms of the contract, was probably allowable in any event.
To see the statement made to the House by the Minister completely relied on the information that you had given him. As a matter of fact, I take it that the names of the contractors were given to the Minister by yourself, in terms of the information that was given to allow him in the House to mention them in the fashion that he did. And even taking in Mayor McDonald and taking in all the other stuff that was coming through at the time, had you went away and checked, that you might have came to the conclusion that the information that I am giving the Minister isn't as accurate as the Minister deserved in the statement that he was
The
making.
role the board have is a non-executive one, so they were not involved in the discussions of drawing up this information. They were reliant on what they were told by officers. Now, what it appears in sometimes that wasn't always as reliable as it should have been, but it's something that, you know, I will address. But you have to understand that as a board, we are advised, we pursue the executives to make certain that we resolve this issue, but it was them that were doing the negotiation, them that were dealing with Maud MacDonald and taking Maud MacDonald on as our expert witness. But it would have been wrong, I think, for the board to try to do the negotiation itself. Its executive team were the ones that were responsible for that.
I'm actually not talking about the board, I'm talking about yourself. You provided the information at a meeting with the Minister that allowed him to go into the Assembly to make the statement that he did. That information has ended up highly inaccurate, also with accusations being made against a number of contractors. And on the basis that information had been around at that time that could have, had it been properly investigated, led you to come to a different conclusion than that. But do you not even think that in around that period, with the information that was given to the House, that you should have considered your position in the whole thing?
I think not. I mean, the issue, which is very important, is a long-running sore has been resolved. That enables us to move on. Actually getting to the bottom of this took a long time. A lot of the negotiation took a long time. A lot of the issues about sampling and revisiting the properties took time.
It's they admitted that the sampling was wrong.
I wasn't speaking of.
Okay. Well, I mean, the key,
Came up with the wrong results.
again, the key issues are, I mean, the Minister was provided with information that he relayed to the House, naming 4 contractors and establishing a figure in the public mind. And questions have been put yourself, Donald, obviously it was yourself who gave that information to the Minister, or was that not?
I'm not certain about the contractors, but I mean, it's public knowledge. I mean, the contractors.
Yeah, but it may well be public. Well, I don't know how public knowledge, because I mean, I don't know all who the contractors are, so it wouldn't be maybe knowledgeable to maybe a lot of the MLAs or people who, but it was certainly public knowledge when there was 4 contractors were named in the House and attached to a figure of £18 million overcharging. That certainly was public knowledge at that point. And I think we've addressed this previously, but I don't think we have the full clarity in our minds yet as to who named the 4 contractors as been associated with this alleged £18 million overpayment. So, how did that information get to the Minister?
I'm not aware that I told the Minister the 4 names, but they are, in my view, quite clearly public, as the Minister himself said.
Certainly are.
So you're saying
it would have been freely available under freedom of information about who they were.
But you're saying you don't recall.
doesn't do freedom of information.
No, I'm just saying that we would, if we were asked under freedom of information, we would.
But you're saying you don't recall giving the Minister the names of those contractors. That's
No, in fact, as I think I said at this committee earlier, I never named the contractors. I just made the point that we had been told that.
And you have said that before in the previous sessions in the committee. I understand. I just wanted to reconfirm it with the Dolores.
Thank you, Chair. And it's my perception, Chair, that in his opening remarks, Mr Hoodless sought to suggest that the previous board had, I think he's used the phrase, kicked the can down the road, but yet we heard from the Northern Ireland Audit Office last week that quite often information was held back from the board. Do you accept that to be true?
Yes, I know. I wasn't saying the board kicked it down the road. The officers advising the board.
Well, certainly that was the implication that I picked up from what you said, Mr Hoodless, so I'm glad you've clarified that point. The second thing that I want to raise is, given that Mr Hare had told this committee that you said that the issue around the overpayments and this experience included frauds, financial malpractice and complex financial issues. And yet we have heard that Campbell TKL themselves have said they're neither a legal firm nor forensic accountancy. And at the end of the whole process, we then learn that the bill submitted from the single action tender was initially agreed at 40,000. The initial bill head was put in at 87,000, and following negotiations with yourselves, it went down to by 26.5 to £66,000. So what confidence can we have as a committee, and indeed the broader public have, that you yourself have the ability to set contracts and follow established procurement practice and give terms of reference to contractors?
We did follow proper procurement practice for the single tender action.
Yes, for a single tender action, and which is now in breach because of the amount. So there was a mad miscalculation of public expenditure, albeit on a much smaller scale, but the principle remains. You actually set up a contract with a poor set of specifications and terms of reference, and then came back to the public purse with a begging bowl for additional funding. So what confidence can we have that you're the right man for the job, given that you cannot even set up a contract for a piece of forensic work, appointing a firm which in its own words says it's neither a legal firm nor a forensic accountancy, that to do a particular piece of work which you said had to investigate frauds, financial malpractice and complex financial issues? It doesn't inspire much confidence.
Well, forensic accountancy would tend to be used where there's fraud. No one was ever suggesting.
Well, that's what Mr. Hare has told this committee, that you suggested to him that this included frauds, financial malpractice and complex financial issues. Are you now saying that that is not information that you give to Mr. Hare?
Yeah, because I mean, I suppose we've moved into the section around the. I think we've moved in there, I mean, following Dolores' question there, to the kind of process around the appointment of Campbell Tickhill. So really the procurement exercise we're addressing here now. And I would point out that in the response, I think, Will, you had made...
Was there previous work?
Donald, let me just, just because I'm just contextualising that last comment, because we're now moved into the discussion around the advocacy or otherwise of the appointment of Campbell Tickhill. Yeah. It was referred to, I think, Will, you had referred to the experience of Campbell Tickhill included frauds, financial malpractice and so on and so forth. So people now obviously do want to address the issue of the actual procurement exercise itself, because this committee in total has expressed concerns around that particular process. So it's, all of the committee have expressed concerns around that, so we'd like to explore that with you. So it's really how the company was procured.
Yes, fine, exactly. I mean, I made a point, and it's a useful clarification there, because I say that was the previous experience, and it was, I mean, very open to take questions on this issue. A classic situation happened to me many times as accounting officer, where people, and particularly a board, in this case, the board felt that it needed independent advice in this process. The requirement of public procurement is that they have to come to get approvals in this process. They came, Donald Hoodless made this situation to the Minister on the 29th, and it became very clear, as I said, that they wanted very quickly to get this group done. A single tender action, therefore, is the only option you really can deal with, because the alternative is if Mr. Hoodless wanted to get this in place, and I think the Minister totally agreed it was important that the Assembly, if there's going to be an announcement, that this was in place quickly, the work was done quickly for the board, that it was important that we couldn't wait the normal 2 months or the 3 to 4 months of an open procurement system for procuring this process. That was not credible. And therefore single tender action was required. That requires a business case to be put to me, and we went through that process. That process was done. I've explained it in my note how that was done, and I'm very happy to answer questions about that process. It's a fairly standard process we had to do in this one, and we had the business case done very quickly. Effectively, I mean, many times what will happen here is actually you do the appointment and then subsequently a business case will be done retrospectively. This was done actually in time, in place, and was well put in place in this process.
I don't have the official record of the particular discussion to hand, but we'll search it out. But I mean, you're suggesting there, if I'm correct, that a conversation took place with the Minister on the 29th?
Yes, that was when the Chairman indicated at the time we told about the time the estimate, he also reported, because it was just after a board meeting, he said that the board had decided it wanted to do this issue and needed to proceed on this issue.
My recollection would be that Donald gave evidence to this committee that after the meeting that he had with the Minister, which explained about the issue around the money and so on and so forth, that after that meeting, and my recollection is that Donald told this committee that he then took the view that when he was subsequently made aware that the Minister intended to make a statement to House on the Monday, he felt it would be important then to get a review mechanism in place. That is not what you're outlining to me, if I am correct in what I'm hearing.
Let me just...
That's a different sequence of events.
Yes. Sorry, my memory was that it actually was at the meeting you mentioned the reference to that issue. But
Oh yes, no. I mean, the key decisions at the board were being told about the 18 million and deciding on the basis of what they've been told that there should be an independent review. The issue was then setting it up. The single tender action was the mechanism through which that was done.
yeah.
Okay, Dolores, please finish up.
Well, Chair, the point is that we are now hearing from people charged with oversight and have criticised the housing sector, and rightly so, in terms of the contract management, that they themselves have not been able to expend public money and set proper specifications for a contract of work, and have come back to the public purse, albeit on a much smaller scale, but the principle remains the same. The specifications that you set out and your knowledge of the work that was required and the experience of the company proves that you grossly underestimated the cost of the contract.
So the business case that came forward from the executive, indeed, when I approved it, indicated that, I mean, this is standard position in contracts of this one particularly, that I think we give them a 10% variance.
Swings and roundabouts approach?
No, sorry, that's not swings and roundabouts. Sorry. The point is that the contracts that can go 10% over without having come back for approval. It went over that level.
I think it did, over
yes,
100%.
Okay, sorry, 1 or 10.
It went over that level at that time, and I've written back, I've given retrospective approval and got those approvals done, given to Max. At that time, they should have come back to me to ask for the extension, and I've said they must check that doesn't recur. But this sort of thing does happen in the process, particularly with contract issues of consultant issues. Sometimes these issues come back. Yes, it was not the specification, the 40,000 initially. Clearly, more work had to be. They found as the work was done, I understand, more work had to be done to prove the issues. So it had to increase in that amount, and they didn't do that correct at the time. They should have got that process.
So it was a flawed business case?
Dolores,
No,
let
sorry,
Will finish.
Chairman,
Let him finish.
I do not think it was a flawed business case. The handling of it when they found more work, should have been done properly. I don't give people, we consider this carefully. It was done, it was delayed. That shouldn't have happened, but it was appropriate. The key issue for myself is that a board, my job is to support the board, doing its work, and let's make sure it's done. The board clearly wanted to get to the root of an issue which I'd been pursuing, as I've explained to you in the second part of this issue. I was very much pursuing as accounting officer with the accounting officer and the housing executive. I wanted to get to the bottom of this case, to start off the Ballinhinch case in 2010-11, and I and the audit office have been pursuing it for a long time. We were not getting the answers in that process, and it was the board did take this issue up correctly, and when they came to this figure of estimates, they did exactly the right thing in my mind. They said they needed some independent expert. Particularly, I think they wanted people with knowledge of how housing ran and were capable in this area, not a forensic auditor, but they wanted to give them, and the terms of reference were set there, and Kel was available, and the team worked, I understand, very hard in that process. And the main thing for myself is that the board of the housing executive has indicated to me that they feel that they've been greatly assisted by that report. It has helped them and Mags and the team as they take forward things in that process. So those are the issues. Now, I say there clearly were glitches in this process. We should have got this response quickly from they should have when they did this over. They found they had to do more work, and I should have been asked to look at that issue earlier. And that we put our hands on that issue, but that is just something you manage in the system, and there are appropriate processes to do it in the correct procurement way.
Chair, just one final question to both Mr Hoodless and, if appropriate, Mr Hare. Do you now believe that the contractors are owed an apology? And who should be accountable?
Actually, we've resolved and settled with the contractors. Actually, I've made it clear all along that the responsibility for the contractor being done in the way it was the housing executives. But in managing the contract in the way it was, the contractors were complicit in going along with it.
Chair, that
I
doesn't
think
really answer my
So, but
question.
let him finish and then you can take it.
and therefore, I'm not certain that they ever came to any of you to say, well, hang on a minute, this contract is not being run in a way that would normally be run. And I don't think an apology is required.
Chair,
But we have settled it, and that's the good
Chair,
news.
it's my understanding that these contractors faced huge financial difficulties throughout the course of these allegations, which were based on estimates, and it quickly hobbled together, it would appear, a summary for the Minister to present to the Assembly on Monday. Nobody seems to be taking responsibility for what really appears to be a lot of misinformation, as you yourself said, Chair. I didn't ask Mr Hoodless about the complicit nature. These contractors were accused in the House of being part of a scandal, potential fraud, and we hear from the Chairman that these companies are not owed an apology by either the Chairman of the Board of the Housing Executive, and we have yet to hear from the Permanent Secretary. I personally believe that these contractors are owed an apology for the way in which the name and the reputation of their firms has been dragged through the mud.
Okay, so may I know whether anybody wants to respond?
I mean, the Minister has made his position clear on the public issue. Can I make the key point is, from my point of view as a county officer, the responsibility was the housing executive had to manage these contracts, right? Responsibility is in the housing executive to make sure the contract was correctly handled in those processes. I will make no more comment.
Well, you've heard the response, so you're satisfied or not. The question for me still remains, are you satisfied that if I'm characterising this correct, that Campbell Tickhill were procured under a single tender action within something like 48 hours or 72 hours? Is that correct?
It's longer than that.
That's why we have. Well, that's one of the reasons for having a single tender action, of course. That's what the process is there to have to deal when you have situations of this sort. That's why the key point is to make sure that people just don't go and do these contracts without letting the accounting officer take responsibility. But that the process was done in that way.
And again, I'm not going to make a further point on other than to say that's the issue that members around this table all expressed concern about from the early stage, is that here we had a company which was procured by single tender action within a couple of days. People couldn't understand the need for the haste, and certainly people were perplexed when they saw that the company themselves pointed out in their opening paragraph to the report that they were not forensic accountants or a legal firm. So people were saying, well, how does that match? And I have to say, from where I sit, when you see the outworking of the Campbell Tickhill exercise and the final settlement, it bears no relation to the outcome, and that's the point that I haven't got a satisfactory response to.
Chairman, members would have been equally concerned had there been a 3 or 4 month delay in going through the proper procedure, and there would have been criticism at that juncture as well.
Well, possibly, and that's why I'm simply asking on reflection.
Yes. Well, can I just make one?
Yes, surely.
I think here the point is, I think that reflecting on this issue, I was giving a single tender action to a report that was asking a particular need on behalf of the board, which was facing the fact to say they felt that they had staff and other issues that kicked things down the road, I think, as they wanted to look at those issues, and they wanted that process. I think the committee's needs and interests, in a sense, are slightly different from that of the board of the housing executive, and I think that's what I'm hearing from this concern. I'm not saying that the needs of this committee obviously have to be answered. I'm just saying, I think that's my take on what the problem has been around the Campbell to Cal issue.
Okay, thank you. Jim, then Michael, Mickey and Stuart.
A couple of questions from Mr. Hare. Friday the 7th of June last year was obviously a very frenetic day in the department because all of this was dealt with extreme haste on that day. And the purpose of the Campbell to Cal report, we've always been told, was to satisfy the chairman that the information previously supplied to the board was accurate and complete. Why then, as a accounting officer who signed off the terms of reference, did you exclude from those terms of reference any need to even speak with the contractors if you're going to get a complete and accurate picture? Would that not seem elementary?
There had, on the point, just to make there had been discussion between the 29th and the 7th on the terms of reference and issues. There had been work done on that process, so it wasn't just one day in that process. There had been, I think, discussion with the housing executive. In fact, of course, the housing executive had produced this work, so they had gone through and decided.
Sorry, could I just stop you there, Mr. Hare, and read you what Mr. Hood has told us when he was here in November? He said, I was told on the Thursday, that's the 6th, that he, that's the minister, was going to do it, that is, make a statement. As I explained, that is why I appointed Campbell to Cal in the 2 days. That is not suggestive of terms of reference and all sorts of things being discussed for the previous week.
But they were.
Sorry, can I just, I mean, I think Mr. Hoodless, if I understand it, explained that the speed was, he would have been, wanted that appointed and completed by about the 10th. I mean, in normal sense, that was the issue, but it was the fact that the Minister was making a statement on the 7th that brought it forward. But at the moment, on the 29th, it didn't have, I said, I think I remember discussing it being by the 30th. I think the discussions were already put in place. I put a senior official to work in the department, to work on that issue, and worked, I think, with staff in the House, and there was drafts going backwards and forwards. So between the 30th and that, there was work done on that. I just want to make that point, Mr. Alistair, because so it wasn't just a sort of one day, let's think of a term. So there was work done, and I knew that had been done. That had gone to my economist, who had gone through the terms of reference and process and thought, and I say, I'd done a business case, and that process, the business case was prepared, it had been worked through, I got signed off from the finance director in the housing executive. Now you make the point of, did I look, I will put my, sorry, I did not, that issue of talking to I'd seen that a clear process had gone through, involving people, looking at terms of reference. This is what the board wanted, and I took that as being, they seem to be a good, broad set of terms of reference.
It didn't occur to you, if we're going to get a complete and accurate account, maybe we should talk to the contractors?
So it was the terms of reference and the responsibility of the...
You signed them off?
I signed off that it was, I was happy that this...
Was that an oversight then, not to do that?
I think the answer is that no, it is. They were a good set of terms of reference in my set.
Could have been a better report if it included that term of reference.
They were the terms of reference the board wanted, and they were legitimate to be signed off. And that was
your job wasn't to give the board what they wanted. Your job as an accounting officer was to get the right terms of reference for the spend of public money that was involved to do the job that was to provide accurate and complete information. Surely, even with the benefit of hindsight, you must now acknowledge that it was a mistake not to include in those terms of reference consultation with the contractors.
I'm
sorry, I'm asking Mr. Hare.
Yes, the answer is, can I get all these things perfectly right? I think every aspect of it.
I'm not asking you.
I'm not, sorry, you asked me. Would it have been good that Cal had been able to speak to the accountant? I expect, I always think in this it would be a good idea in this process, but I'm sorry, I'm not accurate closely enough to that to answer that issue. like to hear Mr. Hooper's view on it. But the answer is, in my general view, is I always like people to consult and take broad views on this issue, but that it wasn't explicitly written into the terms of reference.
Was it ever even canvassed?
It was. I'm not aware of it being canvassed, but.
But you were signing off something to get a complete and accurate flow picture.
But the point was, does the terms of reference, do you put, I presume that when you ask somebody to complete that, do you put in the terms of reference exactly the means by which it could be done, okay? And the answer is, I suppose the answer would say, that's what we were asking for, I presume people would find methods to achieve that.
Yes, but Campbell to Kell point out in the report explicitly that they weren't asked to talk to the contractors.
Well, but you know, people can.
It seems to have been a deliberate decision not to talk to the contractors.
How can I?
The issue was quite simply that the board wanted to know that what they had been told by officers over the period of time on the management of these contracts was full and complete. The issue about whether the 18 million estimate was something else, if I remember correctly in the terms of reference, they were asked to comment on. I personally have the view that they did a very good job for us in telling us
Mr.
the story.
You're not telling us that they weren't asked to tell you if the 18 million was accurate and complete. They were asked to tell you if everything else was accurate and complete,
yes,
but
right.
not the 18 million. Now, the terms of reference do not say that, Mr. Hibbles.
They were asked for their view about that.
Yes, and I'm suggesting that they couldn't give an accurate and complete view in that without talking to the other party. Self-evident.
Yeah, and that's...
Okay, can I ask Mr. Hare something else?
Yeah.
Where did the Minister get the 4 names of the contractors that were put into the statement that he read out in the Assembly?
So I can't. The answer is, I think certainly it was that the Minister, in preparing and considering the issues, I think he asked for advice on what the names were, because I mean that process, I think that was done within the department, because he asked for those names. That's my memory of it. Sorry.
Okay. Asked his staff for the names.
Sorry. I think that's my. I need to check that issue. I'll come back to you if otherwise. But I think that there was an issue. It was the Minister who decided that process. I mean,
so he decided he wanted to name them, and he asked who they were.
Sorry, I think including the speech. I think. Sorry, and to say it's hard for me. I was not involved at the time in the process of the issue, but I'm not sure. But I think it certainly was not something I have any memory of coming from the Housing Executive issue. So I'd have to come back to you on that.
If I can ask Mr. Hibbles, in your statement welcoming the settlement, why in that statement did you make no reference to the fact that there has been one contractor, in fact, underpaid? You were anxious to say in it that there was £670,000 of overpayments. You said there was one contractor not overpaid, but you obliterated the fact that, in fact, he was underpaid and was due £470,000. Why was that?
We stated in the press release that one of the contractors was not.
Yes, you didn't state he was underpaid. You said he was. You didn't state he was underpaid, did you? You wanted to gloss over that. You wanted to spin this to keep that out of the public knowledge, didn't you?
No, it was all in the public knowledge.
No, sorry, the 470,000 was never in the public knowledge at this point.
It was in the joint statement.
Sorry.
If I recall.
I'm talking about your statement. Why, and does it indicate a mindset in the Housing Executive? Why is it you were anxious to headline the 670,000 overpayment, but gloss over the fact that one contractor was underpaid to a very significant extent? Why did you not just want to tell the public that?
Well, I was understood that it was actually in the public domain.
It's not in your statement.
No, it's not in my statement.
It was deliberately left out of your statement, obviously.
I don't think we deliberately left it out.
Okay.
You left it out?
Obviously.
Yes. And we shouldn't infer anything from that.
I don't think you should.
You shouldn't marry that to the fact that you think these contractors aren't due any apology?
I think that we have reached a settlement with the contractors. I am pleased we've reached a settlement with the contractors, and we want to move on.
And the settlement statement didn't mention the 470,000 either, did it?
The settlement statement was agreed between the contractors and ourselves.
And you
That was there.
suited you very well to keep that out of the public domain.
I think not. I mean, the issue, as far as I'm concerned, is that a settlement has been agreed.
You were very animated about the fact that these swings and roundabout contracts are wrong. Nobody's disagreeing with you. And that the housing executive was very much at fault there. Just remind us how many people have been disciplined over that.
I'm not aware. All I can say is I don't think that anyone in senior positions running these contracts now works for the housing.
Yes, but none of them are disciplined.
No, but I mean...
Their exit was eased.
I have to say that a lot of these people have disappeared before my time.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. We have another couple of speakers, and just conscious of the time. Michael, Maggie and Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. Mr Hughes, I've just managed to get the statement that was issued by the Housing Executive Board prior to the ministerial statement. And I'll read from it, where the Chairman of the Housing Executive advised the Social Development Minister, Nelson McCausland, that an internal investigation had indicated an estimated £18 million had been overpaid to the contractor of plant maintenance. So the origins of the word estimated lie, insofar as I can see, in this particular statement. The Minister, in his deliberations this morning, and I assume that perhaps you maybe watched on television or Hansard or got a transcript of the Minister's ministerial statement that was given on the 10th?
10th of
June.
Yes.
Did you watch it on television? Or
I didn't.
Right, so you got a transcript afterwards?
Yeah.
And the Minister this morning, you've heard him indicated that repeated reference was made to the fact that these were estimates, and I believe that Hansard will show that. And yet, in reading the Hansard, the word estimate appears once, and it's caveated, and it's then almost obliterated in terms of any real meaning of the sense of the word. He said the figure is estimated to be some 18 million. And then he said, let me say that again in case you think you have misheard, £18 million in overpayments to 4 contractors. The scale of what has been uncovered is a scandal. The situation in which there were overpayments of 18 million, we are talking about 18 million in overpayments, so it was very widespread. As I indicated, a number of contractors were involved in receiving overpayments. If there are only 4 contractors and 18 million pounds, you are talking about very large amounts of money. When you read what the Minister said, did it occur to you that perhaps he had overstressed or placed great importance on what you believed, according to this, to be an estimate?
It did cross my mind.
And did you communicate that to him?
No, I don't think it was my place to.
Okay, fair enough. And how do you think he I don't want to put words in your mouth, but over-egged the pudding, possibly, springs to mind?
Well, I think, it was my job as the chairman to report what we've been told as a board. I don't think it's... I have no influence, nor should I, on what he then does with the information. Or what he says as a result of it.
Would he have any influence on what you do with information? Would he have any influence on what you do with information?
What I do with it? No, he merely acknowledged what I had told him.
Mr. Hurd, I presume you had signed up the statement by the Board of the Housing Executive on the same morning?
Yes, I was out myself.
And you had seen or heard the ministerial statement later on that day. Did the same thing occur to you, that perhaps the estimate had been slightly taken to the side and statements made that were... Sorry, would it be your place to say that to the Minister or his advisor?
What I say to my Minister is something that has to be between myself and my Minister.
Yes.
Vice President.
Okay, Maggie.
Thank you.
Obviously, the confessional springs to mind. Just to clarify something, you did mention that there was some discussion. The board meeting was on the 29th of May, and you said there was some discussion about a report that we were told, I think in November, by Mr. Hoodless, that the decision was made on the 7th of June, which was 3 days before the Minister's statement. And there had been some discussion, presumably, about obtaining a report or appointing somebody to do a report. What sort of notice would the Minister give of a statement? I mean, is it literally only 3 days? The decision was made, it seemed very quickly, on the 7th of June, and the statement was being made on the 10th. Would there not have been a longer period? You know, would you have been aware, for instance, on the Monday of the previous week that there was going to be a statement, or was that decision made very suddenly based on the £18 million information that had been given?
I can't remember when exactly the Minister, I mean, obviously the Minister heard this process here, and I can't remember how quickly the Minister intimated to us that he felt he wanted to make a statement to handle it that way. But it certainly was an issue that during the week he had made the decision that he wanted to go public. He felt that he had to, and he's explained the reasons why he felt that at that time. Can't remember exactly which day but the key point, Mr. Brady, was that, I mean, on the 29th, Mr. Hootles had indicated that the board felt a need to have an independent review. And by the 30th, he was starting to think about this process. So I, at that time, tasked a member of staff to work to make sure that the due processes were in place, so that by the 7th, a business case and all the process could be done appropriately and clearances achieved.
I suppose the question I'm asking, are Minister's statements made, obviously they're in reaction to certain events, but are they normally done spontaneously? Because Mr. Allister rightly has referred to the frenetic Friday, and I'm just wondering, should there not have been a frenetic Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday leading up to that in terms of preparation for the Minister's statement? Or did he decide on the Friday, I'm going to make a statement on Monday based on the evidence, or in some cases, some may consider a lack of evidence that he'd been given in relation to the contracts?
No, I mean, the normal, as you know, we have to give a notice to the business office, etc., in that process. I've had many times with ministers of different things where, you know, things have come up, as you say, and they've said, "Oh, I must make a statement," rightly, to make sure the assembly is. And sometimes you've had to, you know, do this. But this one, my memory is this one was quite early on in the week. A decision had moved that way. Work was in place then on trying to make the stuff. It was done quite a big pace. But it was not actually. It was not sort of a Friday. Oh, let's make a statement. But it was worked up in the process.
But I suppose I'm suggesting it was 9 days. The other question, just in finishing, is money still owed to contractors? I know there's been a settlement in that.
In terms of the settlement, that covers everything in that period. We still have live schemes, as they were described, 5B and 1A, so we're managing with the contractors, and we've got a firm timeline to close those out properly and reconcile money.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll have a further 3 speakers. I'm just very conscious of the time and so on. So Stuart, Fra, and then Gregory, and then I'll intend to wrap it at that point.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hootles, could you just perhaps remind the committee where the original figure, how the original figure of £18 million came to the board of the executive? Who prepared that figure?
The Director of Housing and Regeneration at the time prepared the figure. Under pressure from the board and me particularly to crystallise what the extent of the problem on these contracts was.
And the department then were aware that was the extent before you had your board meeting where you decided to...
No. That was brought to the board, and after the board meeting it was brought to the attention of the Minister in the afternoon. I met the Minister after the board meeting.
Okay. Mr. Hare, can I just ask, in respect of the single tender action, and you know, we've heard you perhaps indicate the committee with hindsight, broader terms of reference might even be more helpful. But just in terms of who Campbell to Kell were, and bearing in mind that this was coming from the Housing Executive to you, and they were the people who were highlighting the problem, what due diligence checks did you perform to ensure that Campbell to Kell were the right people to fulfil this single tender contract?
We've known of Campbell to Kell in the department. We've known through the work we've done with the Housing and Communities agency in GB. We know the history of the Campbell Cal and its high reputation for doing similar sort of work across England. It's well known in the sector as being one of the very effective teams. It's been used for inquiries in England. So we're well aware of that process, and hence we were happy when that was suggested. We thought that was an appropriate one because we knew of no other Northern Irish-based locally based organisation with those skills, and we knew that the high reputation that Campbell Cal had.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Graham McCann and Gregory.
There's two questions. I want to go back. Well, what you just said. It said that in a briefing paper that the chair of the Housing Executive indicated on the 30th of May that he was aware, when asked, he was aware that the company Campbell Cal had relevant previous experiences. Did he indicate this to yourselves? Was what you're saying there is that you already had knowledge of the experience that existed within Campbell Cal?
Yes.
But I took from that it was actually Mr. Hoodless who had raised the question of Campbell Cal.
He came, it was rightly, because he was the commissioning person. But I say, already we knew of Campbell Cal's work. You will remember, for example, the work on Helen Housing Association, which is, so it was through that. So we were experienced, we knew the issues of having to, what expertise we could draw on for this sort of issue. And it was at that time, I think, that we had understood and had some knowledge of this organisation.
And did it concern you at the time when this was raised that there may have been a conflict of interest with a member of the board who had either still experience or previous experience of working with Campbell Cal?
I was not aware of that at that time. I was not processed.
That's Mr. Greg Lomax, if I understand.
Mr. Lomax, that was, and I think there was,
But would that have changed your opinion of the award and the contract?
He was an associate, and therefore he will have drawn bits of work in this. But the answer is that would have been obviously, if it had been, I think I've seen no particular problem in the issue. Ideally, it should have been brought to my attention if people had known about that issue, just to make sure that there was no question, because he was no personal gain to that issue, or that he had not been influential in making any decision about it, because that, right? But ideally, if people had known about that, it should have been in the papers, but I was not aware of it.
Do you see, in terms of the statement made the House by the Minister, and again I emphasise that the Ministers said that he had made the statement on the back of information supplied, but I take it that yourself, Mr. Hoodless, the Minister, possibly others, had sat down and discussed the contents of the statement before it was made to the House, or do you have any knowledge of the information contained in that?
Draft advice will come from the housing division of the department with setting out that issues. Now, I see something clear going to that stuff. But the Minister will use that material and will make a decision on how he speaks. That's the.
I was certainly not involved in any way.
No. There was no. Sorry, it was an issue done within. It's the normal process.
And given that there was already some concerns being raised about the samples used to come to the £18 million figure, I think there was difficulties raised through the Mayor McDonald report. Did you not advise caution to the Minister about making the statement to the House, especially coming to the figure of 18 million, and that it may be problematic and not be as accurate as has been said?
Sorry, it's difficult for me to give. Advice is given to the Minister. It's not right for me to disclose advice in that sense. Advice was given in the process. There was a brief will being given to the Minister in that process, and I was happy with the brief that was given to him.
With all due respect, I don't think there's any privilege attached to the advice you give to the Minister in your role as accounting officer and permanent secretary of the department. I don't think we can let that sit.
I'm just saying that. I know this material was given up to him, and I was happy with the material that was sent to him. Okay.
You were happy with the statement that was made at
sorry,
that time?
Advice was the Minister stood. He would stand by how he actually spoke in the House. That's the job of the Minister. Advice was given to him.
Okay.
And the final question is that obviously a lot's been said, and I think Alec was at pains to point out, and I had said on the day that any wrongdoing by anybody in this here, that the onus is on all of us to ensure that we get to the truth of the matter, and that's an important thing. But from day one of this, that some of the statements that have been made, and it's not just directly directed at yourself, the statements made give the impression that the housing executive are rotten to the core. And most of it that came from Mr. Hoodless, and that he wasted no opportunity. What I'm asking is, was this running through all the housing executive? Did it rest with senior managers within the housing executive managers? And because the impression that I have had since and before that by and large at middle and local levels of the housing executive, that an excellent job has been done by the people who run the organisation.
It's okay. Yeah. Sorry, let me first again, I'm sure that the chair and sorry. We've done a number of reports from the department in the sense that and we've discussed this and we've shown you, and we've had a lot of discussion. We've emphasised that there are weaknesses in structural issues. We had also, for example, the previous chief executive actually, I think very publicly himself described what he saw the weaknesses in his management, in some of the management and other issues, and was very open about those issues. But that is all, I think it's been a difficult and complex process for the organisation. But the excellence and commitment of so many staff in the housing executive is not to be doubted in that process. Now, like any institution, there are structural failures in organisations and issues and things that people have to deal with in the process. But let us never be at all, no doubt at all, and certainly from a departmental point of view, we work very closely with the housing executive, and we have, our job is to be challenging on issues. But the excellence and commitment of the staff of many of the housing executive is not in doubt on the part of the department.
The housing corporation, housing executive is not rotten to the core. This has been a very damaging incident, this contract, to its reputation. It's our intention to restore it and move on and make certain it provides the services to tenants and fulfils its other responsibilities properly and effectively.
Well, I want to leave it at that because we'll obviously have to return that. But Gregory is just as the last speaker.
Yeah, just a couple of questions to Mr. Hare. Further to what Michael Copeland and Fran McCann had said. I don't want to probe about, obviously, the confidential nature of discussions between the Permanent Secretary and the Minister. But for clarity, once the meeting had been held between the Minister and Mr. Hoodless about the initial scale of the potential estimated problem, would you have become aware of the nature of that conversation, and if so, when?
So I was at the meeting with the process. So
I'm talking about your recollection after and before the statement to the House.
I mean, the conversation with the Minister on this issue. What do you mean? Sorry, apologies.
There's a meeting which you're in attendance at that the Minister has with Mr. Hoodless, and the extent of the potential problem, estimated 18 million, becomes clear. The Minister is then going to make a statement to the House. Was your recollection of the meeting that the Minister and you attended, where this information was relayed, would that then have helped to formulate the composition of the Minister's contribution to the House?
Undoubtedly, I mean, that was the fact. This 18 million, estimated 18 million, was at that meeting was very crucial to the issue and the process, and was, may I say, behind all this issue. I mean, the Minister was very aware for a long time of this issue of planned maintenance, that the issue had not been resolved. The Audit Office was very concerned about it. I think I put a lot of evidence to this committee about my concerns and the fact I've been probing a lot and asking a lot. So it was a really big issue for the Minister. And so the Chairman came and told him at this time, and clearly at that time there was some discussion and a real concern. And as you can understand, in government accounting terms, this is a very big issue, a major issue. I've never had to experience a write-off of this sort in this process, and the issues around the fact that money was not being properly accounted for. This is a very major issue, which had to be lanced. So there was that conversation at that meeting, and undoubtedly in that then the Minister will have reflected on that issue, and then the work will have been done. He will have said how he wanted to present that issue. Advice will have gone to him, and he will have prepared.
But what I want to get at, Mr. Hare, is this. Take aside your current Minister, you as Permanent Secretary, if on any occasion you're present with a Minister when an issue of the import of this extent is discussed, and the minister, whoever that minister might be, is then intending to make a statement to the House a few days after that. If it became clear to you before that statement was made that there may well be an exaggerated sense of the meeting that you attended, would you feel that you, as the Permanent Secretary, would have to draw the Minister's attention to the fact that he intended to exaggerate what you had been present and heard?
No, I mean, the answer is I certainly would watch out that the briefing that went to the Minister was accurate to everything that I understood. The briefing went, certainly the advice to the Minister I thought was in line with what they had heard.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you. Could I suggest that, I mean, that's all the members have indicated at this moment in time, but I do know a number of members are actually trying to get in for a little bit more, so I'm proposing, due to the time and the work that we all have, including yourselves, to get on with the rest of the day, that we suspend this section at the moment. And obviously members will want to reflect on what we've heard this morning, and we may well want to, clarify issues right to you or invite you back, whatever else. But we'll return to this as a committee. Could I thank the four of you and the Minister obviously for being here this morning and dealing with what are very complex and difficult issues and very challenging for all of us. But thank you for your attention this morning, and we'll obviously be talking to each other again soon. Okay. Thank you. Members contented, we just have to park this for now and reflect on what we heard this morning. Obviously, we have a fairly hefty agenda. Could I just suggest that we move then very, very quickly? We have a couple of important matters to just dispense with. And we'll see in a few minutes what time we needed to vote to these. So we'll just move quickly then to the draft minutes, page 5 of your pack. Members content to accept the minutes? Okay, thank you for that. Matters are rising, move swiftly and pertinent to today, actually. Members, in your pack, page 3 of your tabled items. Please. On page 3 of your tabled items, you'll see a letter from the department, and obviously the department's requesting that all future officials called to give evidence would be able to have their legal advisors, and that they'd be able to consult with them during the course of the meeting. What I want to be saying is, we actually last week as a committee considered this in detail. We provided a response declining that request. This letter we're getting in is actually more or less just the same generic application. I think we have a draft. I mean, it's really entirely for the matter of the members, but we do have an evidence session scheduled for 1 o'clock, and it certainly would be my view that there's nothing in this letter which actually would change the decision taken by the committee last week. So just basically advise members that you have a copy of the letter there in your paper, tabled, as I say, items, page 3, tabled items. Members have an opportunity, I hope, to have read that. And I'm just going to put it directly to the committee. Are members content with the decision that we issued last week to the department?
No.
Okay, well, we can go to a vote on this if the members are content. So, I mean, I'll just put a formal vote to that committee. Words will be, having considered the request in that letter contained in page 3 of your tabled items, the committee is agreeable to the application or not. Those in favour of agreeing to the application?
Of the application from, yeah.
And those against? Okay, so then that matter's resolved, then we'll notify the department.
As I said, I raised this question last week again. Again, I'm very concerned that we get letters like this that is signed in the name of the DLO that attends this committee, purely because he is the DLO, and there's no indication of where this is coming from. It's faceless people in the department that won't put their names out or won't say why that they want to go down this course.
Okay, we can note that, or we can write to the department to ask them, but I mean, I'm happy enough the members are content to note that. for now. Is that fair enough?
Chair, can I just ask, in terms of responding to the letter, obviously the department will be made aware, almost as we speak. But in terms of responding formally to the letter, our members contend that we do so, but perhaps we may wish to take some advice on the content of the letter. We are awaiting the DSO's response. Well, the response is indicated there. But whether the committee want to respond specifically to this letter, indicating why it decided not to accede to the request.
Well, did we not deal with that in our last letter to them?
Yeah.
Of the 11th of September?
Yeah.
Chair, just to be clear, the last letter indicated that the committee did not felt that the introduction of lawyers to the process would create an adversarial process, and I wanted to avoid that. But, however, it did say that it would consider applications. For legal advisors to attend. However, the issue with this letter is that it's very generic and there's no reasons given. Just to be sure, it's clear, the committee said that it would allow witnesses to attend. What we have here, and whether members consider it to be semantics or not, it's the department requesting, as opposed to witnesses, of which there are a number.
It's a blanket application.
It's a blanket application.
I think the committee were quite clear in their view of us, but as I say, in the first instance, the letter tells us that, that our response to them has been considered. That's fair enough. But then they can't say on the one hand they're considering it, but on the other hand, actually we want to make a generic blanket application. So, as I said earlier on, I think the members are already taking their view on it, taking a decision on that, and not acceding to this request, and just advise them accordingly. Kevin back to us.
Yeah, Kevin had said that the committee had agreed not to adopt an adversarial approach. Does that apply to all of us?
Hopefully. Okay, so whoever's okay, we've dealt with that. We're now at a point where on the next item on the agenda would be appropriate. It's actually necessary to have a closed session now to deal with the end of session report. I'm presuming this won't take long. Well, I'm hoping it won't take long. So we're now moving into closed session. Okay.
Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room.
Session again. What's the stampede there? So we're at 9:30 next week. Then we've scheduled a financial scrutiny training session for the committee. Members are getting this in all committees, so people will know that they've either had it before or maybe they're going to attend it in another session. So we understand that maybe everybody won't be here at 9:30 next week. Okay. Just the next item would be the correspondence, page 214. Members content to note the correspondence as per the memo, page 214. Read for that. The forward work programme, which is on page 240. Are members content to note the forward work programme as it is scheduled and tabled? Okay, thank you. So then, obviously, then that would conclude this morning's business, and we will reconvene in room 21, and that's for. There's a reason why we're moving to room 21. It's to do with the availability of rooms and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's reconvened. Unfortunately, we have to relocate, but it's room 21 at 1 p.m. Okay, thank you, Ma'am.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly